Some students swear UWorld is way harder than Step 1, while others walked out of Step 1 saying it was nothing like UWorld. Here's the truth. After working with thousands of students, I've seen that it's not about which one is harder. It's about understanding 5 critical differences between UWorld and Step 1 that most students miss. Some of the biggest Step 1 disasters I've seen came from students who didn't understand these differences. And today, I'll show you exactly how to avoid their fate. Difference number 1 is the UWorld difficulty trap. Here's something that challenges the idea that UWorld is harder than Step 1. Some of the biggest score drops I've seen came from students with the highest UWorld scores, especially after multiple passes. The reason why this can trap people is that the first time that people have done UWorld, oftentimes this is the first time that they've ever done a QBank. Because of this, the questions can be extremely difficult. One of the most critical differences between Step 1 and the way that med school tends to test things is that Step 1 is about the application of concepts. You have to learn how to use a principle in a new way, as opposed to just regurgitating information on an exam. And so the first time that someone goes through UWorld, oftentimes they find this very, very challenging. The trap can happen, however, where even if they haven't finished the QBank already, they start to become used to the way that UWorld writes questions. There's certain content that you'll notice repeats on UWorld, and there's certain ways that they like to explain and describe questions, particularly in the vignettes, that people can become used to. In this case, it's not that UWorld is necessarily easier or harder, it's just that after multiple repeated exposures to the same kinds of questions, and especially if you do multiple passes of UWorld, that people start to forget what it's like to apply new concepts to novel situations. Some of the most distraught students I've ever seen coming out of Step 1 did multiple passes of UWorld first, and basically they just forgot what it was like to do new questions. Instead, try to do one thorough pass through the material. You want to focus on understanding as opposed to just memorizing, and especially you want to mix in other question bank sources like from the NBME itself. The key is that you don't want to mistake familiarity for mastery. Key difference number 2 is signal versus noise. Here's where UWorld actually is harder than Step 1. They tend to load their questions with extra details and even distractions. Understanding this key difference between signal and noise might completely change how you view both exams. In educational terms, a signal is anything that points you towards the correct answer, whereas noise is anything that will distract you or potentially just be irrelevant information. For example, in a vignette where the patient had an MI or a myocardial infarction, a signal might be something where it was like chest pain, or they had EKG changes, or a troponin leak. The noise would be something like a recent gym visit. They might want to raise the possibility in your head that it was actually a muscular strain, or they might give them GERD, which also can present with a form of chest pain. Those would be examples where they're actually trying to confuse you. The other kind of noise is just giving you irrelevant details like the mother had mitral stenosis, which has very little to do with anything related to the vignette. As a general rule, Step 1 questions have very minimal noise, and they tend to have very clear signals, meaning they'll give you more often than not the classic presentation of disease. Some of the students that I spoke with recently who took their exam said that there is actually more noise than they expected, certainly more noise than they'd seen on the NBMEs. That said, UWorld tends to be harder, at least in regards to the amount of noise that they include in their questions. They tend to have a lot more distracting details like the ones I used earlier, and they'll even add misleading buzzwords sometimes to try to get you off track. In general, you'll find that UWorld both for Step 1 and for Step 2 will make questions harder by adding extra noise. The key is that you don't want to get used to UWorld's extra complexity, and in particular, you don't want to go into Step 1 thinking that they're actually trying to confuse you. In general, Step 1 questions are clear, and so if something seems confusing or if something seems off, oftentimes the reason is that people just don't understand what concept they're being tested on rather than they're being tricked. The only thing I'll add is that for shelf exams in Step 2, this shifts, where they actually will add more noise to the questions and they tend to make the signal less clear. If you're a medical student or a doctor preparing for either the USMLEs or COMLEX or one of your medical board exams, then be sure to sign up for our free 14-step program where we'll walk you through the most efficient ways for you to improve your score in a short period of time. And if you're interested in getting there faster, be sure to book a free call with our team where we'll break down what it is that's holding you back and, if it makes sense, explain how it is that we can help you to get there more efficiently.